Hey, Fanboy Nation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
You're watching.
We're watching. You're watching Fanboy.
Fanboy. Fanboy.
Fanboy.
Fanboy.
A fanboy, etc.
FanboyNation.
Dot. I assume Tom.
Today, we are talking to John Jurko II about his documentary, Rhino Man. And also with us today is Lennon Maldonado, who is working with the San Antonio Film Festival, where we will be screening the film on the big screen this time, instead of just on a 15-inch monitor. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Doing well. Good to be here.
Listen, it wasn't just a 15-inch monitor. On a laptop, I actually plugged it into the TV and watched it that way. But this is an intense documentary. You even got Prince William to do the opening as kind of a warning of how intense it was going to get.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this project, working with the Rangers and kind of getting to see what it's like to do their work and also the threats that they face, was an eye-opening experience for me. But as we'll probably talk a little bit more, what happened during the filmmaking with our lead Ranger really brought to life how dangerous these threats are, and also is a big part of the reason we got connected to Prince William.
You know, what was the catalyst to get this documentary made? Because not too many people are still aware that poaching, especially of rhino horn, is something that happens to this day.
Yeah, I mean, the catalyst started before I got involved, actually, back in 2015. So my co-director, Matt Lindenberg, he was studying and working at the Southern African Wildlife College in South Africa, and that's where he's from originally. I think he was born in Johannesburg. And he was working with the Rangers there, and a close mentor of his was Martin Mtembu, who was this legendary Ranger trainer, trained over 15,000 Rangers across Africa. And unfortunately, he passed away in a car accident in 2014. And when that happened, Matt really wanted to do something to continue his legacy and follow in his footsteps a bit. And a lot of what he was focused on was education and leadership skills for people living in the local communities there. So as a part of his first project, you know, it was the height of the rhino poaching crisis then. I think at that point, it was about 3 rhinos were being poached a day on average, which is kind of hard to believe. And the Rangers at that time were kind of the unsung hero in the backgrounds, you know, in the bushes, doing their work, kind of outside of the view of a typical person on a safari. And a lot of those Rangers that he was working with and training would say to Matt, you know, nobody knows what we're doing out here, and it's a really intense job, and it just, you know, feels like we're kind of alone sometimes. So he made a promise back then to tell their stories and get the word out about what the Rangers are doing to bring awareness and support for them. And I think little did he know this would snowball into the feature film it became.
And here we are. You were at Santa Fe. Here we are. We're going to be at San Antonio Film Festival. The film screens on Sunday, August 4th at 12:30. How important was it to make sure that people on the film festival scene got to be a part of this and understand what you not only put yourself through, but witness these Rangers doing for these animals?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, from my background is all filmmaking, Matt's is conservation. And so when I got involved in 2018, for me, you know, I always cared about nature and wildlife and grew up in rural Ohio, but I never thought of myself as a conservationist. And the opportunity I saw when I got connected to the story was that we have these incredible humans doing something that they're so passionate about and so dedicated to, that I felt like this could easily open up their world to people that aren't already in the conservation space. And so I think getting it to places like film festivals and in front of the wider public is really important. And I'm hoping that these stories of these brave Rangers will attract people, even if they're not originally concerned with wildlife conservation, the environment so much, but will draw them into the passion and dedication they have and the purpose-driven lives that they lead. And whether that's going to connect them more with conservation or just following that and purpose within their own passion, I hope it inspires that in other people.
Is it almost to the point, like the fact that it costs $20,000 just for the horn, you know, and that they're putting these majestic animals down, and there's still that notion of what, like magical powers or healing or whatever, superstitious ideology that goes along with it. And then for what, like 5 pounds essentially for the horn?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a horn could weigh what, up to 5 kilograms on average, and it's about 20,000 per kilogram. So it could be like $100,000 a horn. And there's been different speculation on prices over time, and depending on what the end product is, there's been numbers all the way up to $500,000 for a rhino horn. So it's just crazy prices. And then you look at the Kruger National Park area and the communities that are kind of sprawling around that space. The unemployment rate is almost 50%. So people are living in a state of, lack of job opportunities, trying to fend for their families. And then you have these crime syndicates, which are essentially like the cartels in Mexico, that are doing everything from money heists, bank robberies, trafficking humans, drugs, and then also involved in rhino poaching. And they have this money and influence to put on people. So it's really a terrible dynamic. And kind of speaking to what you were saying on the demand side, I mean, traditionally it was used as Chinese medicine in a mix of, I think an aphrodisiac is part of it, a painkiller, which isn't any stronger than an aspirin. And so that was kind of the beginnings of it. And I think there's still some use there, but it's really become this status symbol. And so whether that's the horn itself or it's being carved into ornaments or libation cups, a lot of the driver now is this status symbol. And so I think what happened from what I've learned speaking to is, as the people in Southeast Asia and China, as they economically came out of poverty and had a stronger middle class and upper class, all of a sudden in the mid 2000s, like 2005 through 8, they had enough buying power to really start putting even more pressure and demand on these types of wildlife products. And so it's, altogether, it's really created this tough dynamic where these creatures are put under extreme pressure and are really becoming endangered.
And Lennon, being a part of the San Antonio Film Festival, this is the 30th anniversary. I was there for year 25. I'm happy to be back for another milestone year. We talked to Adam Rocha. Year 1 was kind of like this punk rock indie short film festival. It's like, all right, we're going to stick it to everybody because that's just the punk rock attitude. Here we are. The evolution has come around, but there's still a bit of that punk rock in showing a documentary like Rhino Man, because this is a heavy subject that if you have a weak stomach, make sure to bring like eye covering or something, or put your hand in front of your face, because there's some heavy scenes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my role with the film festival this year was basically just screening all the submissions that we have, right? Like managing the actual submission process, and like finding judges that were like from a wide range of life to like really get an idea of how an audience might react to a documentary. So John, I'm glad to be talking here in the same space with you, because my team, as well as myself, we really loved your documentary, and we thought it was very important that a story like that could show at the film festival.
When you sit down and you watch a documentary like Rhino Man as part of the selection process, because you guys get quite a few submissions for the film festival, especially the 30th anniversary. It's not like you got 12 of them like it was year 1.
Yeah.
You get a bunch coming in at year 30, and you sift through them. What does the narrow down process look like?
Yeah, so I was trying something a little new this year. Like, we're an entirely volunteer festival, right? And that's both like college students, high school students, people interested in film. All in all, in a given year, it really averages out to be around 30 judges, right? So to narrow it down, we had 120 submissions just in the feature film category this year, right? That also included about like 30 or 40 other documentaries and narratives, just everything from all over the place, locally and internationally. And I essentially broke up the judging process into 3 different blocks, right? Like one team of 10 judges would judge for the first 4 months. Next 4 months would be 10 more people, just to mix it up, right? So no one gets burnt out or leans one way on the bias of what they want to see in a festival. I tried to really keep it balanced, and thankfully, coming up on crunch time in the last 4 months, that's sort of when I would bring in people who had done it really in the past with us, who had acted as judges. And based on their scores and people that we're familiar with, new talent, new voices and thinking, right? We basically carved it down from the 120 submissions to the around 42 films that we're going to be showing. But it became obvious very early on that Rhino Man was going to be in there because, again, all the different sections of judges that came and went all had their own voice. And thankfully, we were like speaking with one voice on how much we love the film, of course.
You know,
Very excited. I don't want to keep gushing, John, obviously. It's just
No, for
like
sure.
when you see the link on a screen for 11 months and then get to like actually like, okay, it's 2 weeks away. It's obviously very different. So. Yeah.
And John, it's fantastic because this is not a propaganda documentary. You know, we've had those that had a political agenda. I've seen so many of those, whether on the left or on the right, pushing an agenda and having the narrative tell a story that they want. Whereas with Rhino Man, it's a true form documentary where you truly follow these rangers and show us their experiences. As a documentarian and, you know, a guy whose ancestry comes from the Balkans that now grew up in rural Ohio going to South Africa, or I'm sorry, going into the continent of Africa, and you see all this, what's it like for you and what do you learn about yourself as a filmmaker seeing what these rangers go through?
Yeah, that's a really, really good and interesting question. I mean, this was definitely my first time on the African continent. I mean, you always see the beautiful wildlife documentaries and nature and rhinos and elephants and lions. So, you know, it was kind of exciting in the back of my mind getting to see that for the first time. But really kind of landing there and getting in the mix of the selection process for the ranger selection, getting to meet Anton Mzimba, the amazing ranger we follow, it really opened my eyes to the broader world that they were operating in. And it's such a complex situation, and we probably only touch on some of it here and there, and it's kind of infused a little more subtly throughout the film. But it's everything from social dynamics that are influencing this situation. I mean, I think most people know a little bit about apartheid and some of the effects of that, and there's still after effects, the crime, as we talked about, the demand in Asia, and then just the different tensions between communities and these conservation spaces and different people operating in these spaces and what they're trying to do. So it's really been, I think, I don't know. I mean, going into it, I was like, oh, I'm going to help out for 6 to 8 months and help make this film that was already had a little bit of legs underneath it. But the more I got into it, connected to the people again. And I think that's why, for me, it was so important to focus on that human aspect. You mentioned it's not political, and I'm glad you say that because I really, you know, this is a part of a nonprofit's mission, and it's been funded in part by this nonprofit, Global Conservation Corps, which is doing amazing work. But I never wanted it to feel like a heavy-handed, you know, call to action in a specific way. I wanted it to be able to live on its own without the call to action, which is a part of it. So I think through all that, just learning, I don't know, just learning and being surprised by the connections that you make as a filmmaker, especially as a documentary filmmaker. And with this one, it was really, I mean, there were a lot of ups and downs, but some painful times when, you know, we all became really close to Anton Mzimba, who is just an incredible human. And when we lost him in 2022, I mean, that was a blow just to the team as friends of his. And then as a filmmaker trying to grapple with that and figure out what to do with the movie. Should we add what happened to him in the film? Because we were basically done in 2022, 2 years ago. And then you get connected to someone like Prince William and United for Wildlife, and you know that's because of Anton and what he was doing, and because of his death, all of a sudden the film has more power and is getting out there in a bigger way. So it's always been strange trying to grapple with those kind of competing emotions and drivers. But you know, getting to know Anton, and he spent probably 7 years helping us make this movie, and he really believed in getting the message out there and sharing with people what Rangers are doing. So I hope that we're doing right by him and carrying on his legacy and trying to make it more powerful by telling the part of the story that's a little tough to watch.
And will you be at the screening as well? Will
Really
there
tough
be
to
a Q&A following?
I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make it. I'll keep kind of checking my schedule. It's just been kind of a brutal travel year for me, and between budget and traveling, it's always tough. But really hoping that people show up, because there's nothing like watching a film with a group of people together in the audience and experiencing that. And I've had the fortune to sit in on quite a few screenings, and definitely, like you said, there's a lot of emotions, everything from, there's some laughter and some funny moments here and there, but there's a lot of tough moments, and hopefully most of them are tough in a beautiful way. I mean, I know there are some graphic images, and I always hate to be over the top with that kind of stuff and do it gratuitously, and hopefully it was done in a way that feels tempered and appropriate, because I think we had to show some of that because it's the reality, and that is what the stakes are for these rangers in terms of what happens to some of these rhinos. But yeah, hopefully it's done in a way that feels like it's done with care and love.
Right. Well, it's not a French documentary. You actually have to have some levity and humor in this. And if it was a French film, it'd just be all misery all the way through. No, but like in real life, you have to have levity too. Like I'll give you an example. When the pier blew up in Lebanon, I called my cousin George, who still lives in Beirut, and I was like, "Are you okay?" And his response was, "Yeah, the window stopped blowing out about 3 blocks ago, so we're good." So when you're used to living in that level of tragedy, that you have to find humor in that regard. And I was glad that you were able to find humor in these heavy situations.
Yeah, and even just being out there with the Rangers, I've spent so much time riding in the back of the trucks with them, going out on the reserve, and they're just telling jokes the whole time. I mean, they're cracking each other up. I mean, they take their job very seriously, but downtime, they really use humor to break up that tension and to build those bonds of brotherhood between them.
If there's one message that you want the audience to get from it, especially on August 4th, where it's screening at the Radius Center, what would you want the audience in attendance to understand about what's going on with Rhino Man?
Yeah, I mean, I think, not only in South Africa, but Rangers are all around the world doing this work. So I think the biggest takeaway is to gain an understanding of what Rangers are sacrificing and the passion and love they have for our wildlife, our planet, nature. And if you're out there, whether it's in a national park in the US or you're in South Africa or somewhere else on a safari, if you see a ranger, just tell them thank you for their work, because it can be a lonely job. Whatever national park or private park you're working in, usually it's a massive space. You're out there for often 28 days on a deployment at a time, away from your friends, your family. You don't know if anyone really cares what you're doing out there. And during those tough times, it always makes a huge difference when someone approaches you and says thank you. So I think that's the first thing. And then if you can, we have a social impact campaign that's really supporting the next generation of Rangers. It's kind of a pipeline from the youth all the way up to training Rangers and taking care of families of fallen Rangers. So people can find that on our website, rhinomanthemovie.org, and donate if they feel like that's a cause they want to support. And just take that inspiration from the Rangers in the film, and whether that's conservation or something else that you're passionate about, try to find a way to live a life with purpose. Because, man, the people out there that I've got to meet through this film really change your perspective on what it's like when you're following something that you care about that much.
I dig it. Thank you so much, John. And Lennon, take us home. What are we going to expect with the screening, and how are we going to be able to find everybody for SAFilm to come out and check out Rhino Man?
Yeah, so it's going to be screening at the Radius Center, as you had mentioned, John. It's right across from this building that's called the Tobin Center. That's a performing arts center in San Antonio. So it's right across the street. It's a beautiful little building and like a pretty artsy sort of space. You know what I mean? We're basically just starting to blast things out on social media pretty much all this week. You know what I mean? We had the lineup finalized a couple of weeks ago. So we kind of cut it a little close, but people were still submitting films all the way up until like 3 or 4 weeks ago. So we're putting out the word, making sure everybody knows. Robert, thank you for also, making this happen. So we'll be doing our thing. We'll be making sure that the word is out there.
Right. And since Lennon is a local, he's so used to it. It's like Tuesday afternoon traffic for him. It doesn't matter anymore. But the Tobin Center is about half mile away from the Alamo. So get done with the screening, take a quick trip to the Alamo, check out some San Antonio history, and then head back to the theater for the evening events.
We're going to be there all week. Absolutely.
I'm going to try to catch a Missions game. I actually bought a San Antonio Missions t-shirt just because
Yeah.
this is what I love about minor league baseball, since I'm also a PA announcer for a couple of minor league teams as one of their backups.
Okay.
The fact that it's the alternate logo is a flaming chancla, so it's a flaming slipper. All right. And I was like, I have to have this t-shirt. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Because like if whether you're Hispanic, Middle Eastern, Indian, African, wherever, you've had a slipper thrown at you. So the fact that it's a flaming slipper is the greatest logo I've ever seen.
Nothing says San Antonio more. Absolutely. Yeah, it's there. You know what I mean? It's ubiquitous, especially here.
Like, I don't want a regular San Antonio Missions hat. I mean, granted, it's a beautiful logo. I love the fact that it's involved with St. Anthony and San Antonio itself. But the fact that the alternate logo is a flaming slipper, I was like, no, have to have it.
Well, hey, have fun. It's probably going to be hot as heck, but that's fine, right? That's why you do it.
I said I'm going to try to go, but you guys are going to keep me busy with all the panels and everything else. So I'm excited for that more so than anything else.
Go on like a $1 beer day or something, right? All right.
Lennon Maldonado, thank you for filling us in on what's going on at San Antonio Film Festival, especially with the documentary scene. John Jurko II with Rhino Man, congratulations. Screening again is August 4th, 12:30 at the Radius Center in San Antonio. It's going to be a great time. Come on out. It's going to be hot, but it's going to be Texas hot, so it's going to be worth it.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Lennon.